In this example, we factor the trinomial 30x squared plus 34x minus 8. Now, our first step, anytime we encounter a polynomial that needs to be factored, will be to look for and take out any greatest common factor. So, let's take a look at 30x squared plus 34x minus 8. Is there any number or variable that's common to all three terms, 30x squared, 34x, and negative 8? Notice 2 divides into 30, 34, and 8. And in fact, that's the greatest common factor for those numbers. X squared appears here, x appears here, but there's no variable here. So the only factor we can pull out is a factor of 2, and let's do that now. When we take 2 out, that leaves us with 15x squared plus 17x minus 4. After taking out the greatest common factor of 2, we have 15x squared plus 17x minus 4. And that brings us to our next step. Our next step is to look at our remaining polynomial, the polynomial left after taking out the greatest common factor. In this case, we have a trinomial. And I like to factor my trinomials by using the box method, as is discussed in our video lectures for the course. So let's recall the box method for factoring the trinomial 15x squared plus 17x minus 4. I'll start by simply writing down our trinomial right here, and this is where we're going to focus. To factor this, I want to observe two things. First, I want to observe the lead coefficient, and second, I want to observe the last constant term. In our box method, we take the lead coefficient, 15, and that serves to be the number which is going to help us fill in the first column. The last constant term, or last coefficient if you like, negative 4, will help us to fill in our second column. Now, what goes in these columns again, just as a reminder? In the first column, I want two numbers that are factors of 15. In other words, two numbers that multiply to 15. And in the second column, I want two factors of negative 4. In other words, two numbers that multiply to negative 4. So let's just pick some random numbers. 15, the first two numbers that I think multiply to 15 off the top of my head are 5 times 3, and negative 4 would be 2 times negative 2, let's just say. So this is one possible box scenario. Now, how do we know if this is the correct box that will help us to factor this trinomial? Well, now we do a bit of cross multiplication. We now check by cross multiplying. We take 5 times negative 2, and 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. And we cross multiply the other way, 3 times 2, and that gives us 6. And then we add these two numbers together. 6 plus negative 10, that equals negative 4. Now, this number here should be our middle coefficient if this box is filled in correctly. But negative 4, notice, does not agree with 17. So that means this box is not a good box, and we're going to have to try a different box. All right, so we're going to create another box, and again, the first column, it has to have the factors of 15, and the second column is going to have the factors of negative 4, two numbers that multiply to negative 4. So let's see. Let's try a different combination. Let's try 5 times 3. And this time, instead of dividing it up into 2 and negative 2, how about 1 times 4? And let's put a negative sign on the 4. Let's try cross multiplying again and see what our result is. This time we multiply 5 times negative 4, and that gives us negative 20. 3 times 1, and that gives us positive 3. And if we add 3 plus negative 20, that result is negative 17. What are we trying to get? We're trying to get positive 17. Oh, so we are so close. In fact, all we have to do really is get these signs switched, right? Instead of having a negative 20, which gave us the negative 17, we would want a positive 20 and a negative 3. So let's just fix this box ever so slightly. Let's take that negative from the 4 and move it up to the 1. As so. Now, negative 1 times 4 is negative 4. 5 times 3 is 15. And let's cross multiply again. And absolutely, we're going to get the right answer this time. 5 times 4 is 20. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. And this time, when we take negative 3 plus 20 and add them, we get our middle coefficient, 17. That's the magic number that we're looking for. So this is our box. This is the one that we're going to use to factor this trinomial. We take this row, 5 and negative 1, and this becomes our first factor, 5x minus 1. Let me just write that right here beside it. And then we take our second row with the 3 and the 4, so we're going to have this being 3x plus 4. And we have to be very careful that these signs match right here to what we had in the box. These are our two factors, and so when we come down here to factor 15x squared plus 17x minus 4, it is simply 5x minus 1 times 3x plus 4. And recalling, we're factoring this polynomial, so we had that factor of 2 that we took out at the beginning. So to factor it completely, we're going to have to re-put that factor of 2 in front again. And so our polynomial, 30x squared plus 34x minus 8, factors as 2 times the quantity 5x minus 1 times the quantity 3x plus 4.